Hey team, Richard Tubb here with a new video demo. Now, long-time viewers of my content will know that I'm a huge advocate for managed service providers, or MSPs, partnering with other technology companies to deliver services and solutions that they may otherwise not be able to offer their clients. And in my opinion, this has never been more important than when it comes to cybersecurity. So today, I've invited my friend Phil McGowan of Huntress to talk about their managed security platform and how it benefits MSPs. Phil, welcome. How are you doing?
Doing very well, thank you, Richard. Thanks so much for having myself and Huntress on today.
My pleasure. Well, Huntress has sort of swept across Europe, a very big name in North America with managed service providers, but over the last couple of years has become super popular with European MSPs. But I guess for the benefit of anyone who has not heard of Huntress before, who are Huntress? How do you help MSPs?
Sure. So Huntress provides enterprise-grade cybersecurity for everyone. So for businesses of all sizes, not just the 1%, the kind of banks that might have the largest security budgets and security teams. We try to democratize cybersecurity technology, and we partner with MSPs to get that technology into the hands of end user businesses that need to be secured.
And I mentioned Huntress has become hugely popular amongst MSPs, first of all in North America, now in Europe. What do you put that popularity down to?
I think it's really down to Huntress priding themselves on doing the right thing by the MSP community we serve. So yes, we build products and we sell products, but we also think how else can we give back to the community and particularly when it really matters. So let's say there is an incident, as happened last year with the Screen Connect vulnerability, that is obviously going to impact a large number of managed service providers. That's when Huntress stepped up, and not just for our existing partners, but for the wider community. We're there to help with the kind of research, the skills that we can bring for recreating exploits, and just advising MSPs on how they can protect themselves when it matters most. So that's one thing that stands out, I think, that gives us a good reputation amongst MSPs. And the other thing which we may touch on at some point today is the more kind of formal programs we have to help MSPs, like the Neighborhood Watch program. So it's completely free for Huntress to be used by an MSP internally.
Yeah. How would you differentiate what Huntress does from some of your competitors? Because let's be upfront and honest here, this is a crowded market. There are lots of options for MSPs in the cybersecurity space. So how is Huntress different?
I think we focus on the outcome, what we're really trying to achieve, right, in partnership with managed service providers, and that really is hunting down hackers, wrecking hackers, we would call it, right? So we need to make sure that we have the technology in place to do that, and there's really no compromise with that. So a lot of it will relate back to the licensing, believe it or not, right? I've worked with quite a few cybersecurity technologies that can become very complicated when it comes to licensing and SKUs, and you might need an add-on or a bolt-on to get the kind of top-tier service. So Huntress radically simplifies that. So we don't have this concept of kind of add-ons or bolt-ons, right? We always include, for example, our 24/7 SOC, something that maybe a small, medium-sized business wouldn't have access to ordinarily. We're including our SOC wherever Huntress technology is deployed. So thinking again about that outcome, what we're trying to achieve, security is a 24/7 sport. You can have attacks happening at 2 a.m., you can have attacks happening on the weekend, and if the MSP themselves or the end user business is not kind of staffed within those hours, then Huntress is on hand because we've included that 24/7 SOC. And as I say, that's true across all of our products there.
Yeah, and SOC, just for the benefit of people who have not come across that term before, Security Operations Center.
Absolutely. Yeah. So pleased I don't know if there's a buzzer or a klaxon, but if there's a particular acronym that I use, I've been in the industry for a while, so there's a few acronyms that might crop up. But absolutely, yeah. The Security Operations Center. So we have our SOC based in the UK and Ireland, based in North America and Canada, and based in Australia and New Zealand. They are the humans behind Huntress, I would say, right? So they're doing the threat hunting, the investigations to give our partners, the MSPs, the incident reports.
Yeah, and we'll get a little bit more into that shortly. But I guess before we jump into the video demo, What other solutions do Huntress offer? So you mentioned the SOC there, but there's quite a portfolio on your platform now, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. So Huntress has a managed security platform. When we say managed, we mean that the security operations center is always looking at the products that are deployed. So the 4 products in this platform would be, firstly, our managed EDR. That's our endpoint detection and response. You would deploy the Huntress agent to your servers, your workstations, Windows, Mac OS, who knows, maybe Linux soon too. And then we'll be able to monitor those endpoints, right, with the tool there. We also have what we call an ITDR, an Identity Threat Detection and Response product, where we are at the moment monitoring Microsoft 365 environments for signs of compromise there. We fairly recently, I think it was October last year, 2024, we brought out a SIEM tool. So we're able to now collect logs, and perhaps that's something that we'll be talking about today. That's also a managed SIEM, so our SOC looks at what's ingested. And then the 4th product we have is security and awareness training.
So managed is the key word here. We're going to get into that a little bit further, but as I said right at the start of our conversation, I'm a huge fan of MSPs buddying up, teaming up, strategic alliance, whatever you want to call it, with technology providers like Huntress. So, can you show us your screen, Phil, and give us a walkthrough of some of these platforms?
Yeah, absolutely. I would be delighted to. So let me just kick off a screen share, and I have access to Huntress portal that we will go through now. So hopefully, Richard, you're seeing this demo.huntress.io first of all.
I can, yeah. So there's obviously lots of different aspects to this. Let's start with one of the things you mentioned, managed EDR or endpoint detection and response, if we can. How does it work? How does it help MSPs?
So I touched on the environments we would support with our managed EDR. So what we're protecting with the endpoint detection and response is your Windows, your Mac OS, right, your workstations and servers, and then wherever that Huntress agent is deployed onto those devices, what we'll start to do straight away is look at the processes that are running on that particular machine, look for things as well like persistent footholds. We monitor our ransomware canary files. There's a whole range of detections that we have, again with that outcome in mind of spotting the attacker in the environment. So there are different areas of the platform that we can look at, but what it would really boil down to is, have we uncovered any incidents with that endpoint detection and response product? So an incident from Huntress will either be low, high, or critical in severity. And I guess taking a bit of a step back, this is where not only have we detected something suspicious, we'd call that a signal on one of your endpoints running Huntress, but we've also investigated that signal with our 24/7 security operations center to determine, is this genuinely a threat? Is it something that we need to raise to our partner? And is it also something that we need to remediate and clean up? So those are the different aspects. It's the detecting the signal, investigating it, and also remediating it, right? So let me know if it would be interesting to see any kind of examples of that. We have a few in this demo environment.
Yeah, let's jump through it, because I think it would be very powerful for an MSP to see what it actually looks like.
Perfect. So, I mean, the kind of screen we've been on so far is the command center. So yeah, wherever you've deployed Huntress, you're going to see some data points there, right? I'd say the really key data point, though, is the number of active incidents. If this is ever anything higher than 0, then I'd recommend you reviewing that incident. So let's have a look. There's actually 13 incidents in this demo portal here. That have come from different environments we'll perhaps talk about today, but you mentioned at the start there you'd like to perhaps start with the endpoint detection and response. So I have an example incident report from a Windows host called Charlie, and what we can see here is, firstly, it's a human written report that's been loaded into the portal here. So where our SOC has done the investigation, they've actually taken the time to write this up. It's not just been automatically spat out on an automated basis by a system. And what we've seen in this case is a piece of malware called Covta was running on this Windows host. We're condemning it based on a foothold that we found, so something in the auto runs. That's often a persistence mechanism for attackers, is they'll load whatever they want into the auto run so that when the computer starts up again, their programs start up and they have that persistent access therefore. And we can see processes running which were suspicious as well. Obviously at this point it's confirmed by our SOC as malicious, so we're giving the report and also the remediation plan. So we can go ahead and delete our registry value, delete some files, we can reboot the host. We're asking our partner in this case, with the example I'm screen sharing, to approve what we'd call an assisted remediation. So at the point of that big green approve button being clicked, these actions will be carried out by the Huntress agent running on the machine. We can change the configuration though if the partner prefers, and we can actively remediate, we'd call it. So we can, any time of day, carry out the actions on behalf of our partner without waiting for approval every time.
And forgive me for interrupting, Phil, but this is a very important point, isn't there? Because there's going to be some MSPs watching, and whether you call the Huntress service outsourcing, partnering, buddying up, whatever you want to refer to it as, there's going to be some MSPs who are worried about losing control. So this shows how there's a level of accountability there, isn't there?
Yes, absolutely. So we don't, mandate any particular configuration. We would recommend any managed service provider that's considering Huntress technology to first trial it, get comfortable with it, use it internally perhaps, and maybe try it on a few customers as well, just to get a sense of what sort of things will Huntress pick up in the environment. And then when it comes to remediation, you're absolutely right, Richard. That's where sometimes MSPs are quite rightly concerned if a piece of software is going to be carrying out an action on an endpoint that managed service provider is responsible for. The partner, the MSP, they may want to just get a feel of what sorts of things are we going to be suggesting as remediations. They can retain the control to case by case approve those. But I think most partners I work with are setting active remediation to on, and doing so for the different severities of Huntress Alert, low, high, and critical. Because the experience our partners tend to have is that we have a very low false positive rate. So when we are suggesting, look, let's carry out remediation, it's because there is a real threat in the environment rather than any kind of false positive or something that's benign. So the majority of the time, the partner would find themselves clicking approve anyway if that's the way they've got things set up. And on a very rare occasion, so I think it's less than 1% of the time, 0.7% is our false positive rate, in which case, if that does happen for you, just please reject the incident report then.
Yeah, and I speak from experience here, having used a service like Huntress in my MSP business, and whilst it gives you the confidence initially that you get to approve things within a real short period of time, Phil, as your MSPs have probably found out, it's like, oh yeah, there's very few false positives, just set it auto approve.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think there's different aspects to remediation. I've kind of dived into the remediation tasks because that is related to the incident report we were looking at here. But there is also a concept of host isolation, which is a very, very important containment mechanism. So there really aren't a huge number of Huntress settings. It won't take hours and hours to configure this. But you'll notice here, as well as the active remediation approval we were just discussing, there's also host isolation, which is turned on by default. Because if we are detecting an attacker in an environment, whether they're trying to deploy ransomware or move laterally across the network, in cases like that, we want to be able to isolate a host. So put a machine into a state where you can only talk to the Huntress portal, can't talk to anything else on the network or anything external, unless you've specifically listed a particular IP, and that way the attacker will hopefully lose their access and the attack won't spread.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We'll talk about onboarding in a bit. I don't want to get in the way of your flow too much, but I'm just interested, what is turned on as default out of the box on this screen that we can see here?
That's a good question, as we have this screen in front of us. So the host isolation is turned on by default.
Yeah, makes sense.
The identity isolation, and perhaps we'll go a bit deeper on this when we talk about Microsoft 365, but that's also turned on by default. The credential reports, this is Huntress looking for password files stored in plain text, so stored in an insecure manner. That will be turned on by default to look for those. The active remediation approval is actually turned off by default. And this is where I think it's important to go through a Huntress demonstration a bit like this, but also go through a trial, have a chat with what would be your aligned Huntress account manager and also sales engineer to understand this option and just see, is it something that you want to turn on? And you can go a little bit deeper as well, because let's say you wanted this turned on as a global setting. You can still create an exclusion if you wanted to say, well, actually, let's turn off that active remediation we've discussed a couple of times for a particular organization of mine or for a particular host, if I wanted to do a host level exclusion.
Yeah. And obviously, it might sound obvious, but let's be clear about this. Huntress is a multi-tenant solution, isn't it? So it is built specifically for managed service providers. This isn't an enterprise product that has been forced onto the MSP market and you have to use it per client. It is, you can look at all your clients in one place.
Absolutely, you can, yes. So the best way, I guess, to get a sense of that is just if I just hover over the top left, where it says Huntress demo. For this, it would be your MSP name here, right? And that's the account level. That's the global view that will see all of the customers you've loaded into the Huntress platform. And there's plenty of easy ways to get those customers onboarded. We might talk about later on. But there's also the level of an organization, which is a customer of yours. So that helps with configuration, yes, but also when it comes to things like reporting, you can get a report for each customer that can be sent out to those customer contacts if you want it to be. And also if it's appropriate to give any of your customers, perhaps internal IT teams, access to the Huntress portal, you can very much limit that access to that particular customer's organization in your Huntress portal.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Now, EDR isn't exactly traditional remote monitoring and management, RMM, that many MSPs are going to be familiar with, Phil, but there are similarities here, aren't there? And one issue I hear from MSPs with RMM tools is differentiating the noise from the signal in the alerts, like getting overwhelmed with too many things. So can you show us, how does Huntress EDR only deliver signal, not noise?
That's a really key question. Most of the managed service providers I work with don't have the luxury of lots of kind of spare time on their hands. The day job keeps them pretty busy.
For sure.
So particularly when it comes to security, you want to really focus your attention on the threats that have been confirmed rather than your MSP team sifting through the noise themselves. So that, in my opinion, is one of the key value points for Huntress, where we're including our Security Operations Center, our SOC, with whatever Huntress product you've purchased. That means we can take a lot of the heavy lifting off of your plate when it comes to an investigation that happens before an incident report gets raised. So if we perhaps look at the investigations tab, you can see as the partner logging in here, right, investigations have happened. So a signal was picked up for an M365 user, something suspicious there, or for a host. But the investigation itself does not trigger an alert to the partner. It's only when the SOC has done their investigation and determined, yes, this is a threat, this needs to raise the kind of incident report we looked at a moment ago, that the partner will be notified, in their PSA, if the ticketing system's integrated, or over email, or it can be over SMS and robocall if that's a contact method that's wanted. So we're not tapping the partner on the shoulder unless we're confident this is a threat. So that comes back to that false positive rate we touched on a little bit earlier, right? It's 0.7% of the time that we have a false positive. 99% plus of the time when we're raising something to a partner, it is a genuine threat, and that's because we've taken the time to do the investigation first with one of our very talented SOC analysts, right? One of our human beings, right? That human set of eyes doing the threat hunting and the investigation.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I've heard great things about Huntress and how you onboard new MSPs. In fact, I'm going to say out loud here, Huntress do incredible events. You and I, just before we started recording, talking about your latest roadshow coming up. I was a part of a roadshow a while ago called Breaches and Brews that Huntress put together, which was awesome. So if you get the opportunity to go to a Huntress event, definitely do so. It's a lot of fun, as well as talking cybersecurity, of course. But the MSPs that I spoke to there were raving about the Huntress onboarding process. So what does the setup routine look like? How does it look in practice for a new MSP using Huntress?
So I would imagine that a lot of those positive reviews are coming from the fact our platform is designed for MSPs, right? So I think you touched on it earlier on, Richard. It's not like some sort of technology that was first designed for the enterprise that we're now trying to kind of adapt and push on to MSPs. That's not the case. We've designed this from the beginning with MSPs in mind. And I think that does start with onboarding. So if I go to the hamburger menu here and click on download an agent, it's very easy to install the Huntress EDR software. You can do a manual install if you just want to do a tiny little bit of testing there, but at the point you want to roll out more broadly, I'm sure to Richard, yourself, and a lot of the people watching, these are some very familiar names in terms of RMM tools that can be used to deploy Huntress, right? Or indeed things like Intune, or very generic things like PowerShell scripts that can be used. So there's a plethora of options to install Huntress, and each of these are documented. So let's say, for example's sake, you wanted to use Intune, just click on the guide, and then we'll take you through the steps to push out the Huntress agent. You're just going to need a couple of bits and pieces like a Huntress account key and organization key. It's easy enough to grab those from this page here. So with that multi-tenant setup, you can push out to all of your customers or a subset of customers very easy with the tools that you probably use day to day anyway. And if you do run into any stumbling blocks, or you just want a little bit of extra support, some kind of screen share to go through that, then that is something that my team, the sales engineering team, would be happy to help with. Often MSPs that work with Huntress have gone through a full no limitation trial anyway, so at the point they're ready to perhaps take out a Huntress subscription, they've already gone through the process of onboarding at that stage.
And when I said that MSPs rave about this, so obviously it's quite easy to deploy. What you've shown on screen there is going to be very familiar to any MSP, but how quickly does the Huntress solution then take effect?
It's pretty instantaneous, right? So the first survey might take 15 minutes, say, then we get all the information about the device that we're installed onto, but that monitoring that we do for all the processes that run, that's one of the ways we catch the attacker when they access the endpoint, because their activity looks very different to the normal user activity on the device. That monitoring happens straight away. So the Huntress agent starts checking in every couple of minutes, and then it's feeding that telemetry around the processes we've captured, what's in the auto runs. All of that is fed back to the Huntress portal, where we can run our detections against it. So as soon as you install that, the service is live and effective. It was quite fortuitous earlier on. We looked at just the settings page, so there are a few settings to review, but even if you haven't yet had the chance to go through that settings page, as soon as you've installed Huntress, you're getting the protection of our agent software, but also the SOC to investigate anything that comes from the deployment.
And I've spoken to some MSPs, and we won't mention any names here, but they've installed Huntress, they've put it across their client base, and it's immediately come up with things that they've previously missed, quite scary things. Have you come across instances like that, Phil?
Yeah, to be honest, I come across instances like that on an almost daily basis, because my team, the sales engineering team, is very much involved in trials. So it's often during trials that Huntress may, in some cases, find examples of a live, in-progress attack, or, as per your question, Richard, we may pick up remnants, something that's left over from a previous attack. So even things like a persistent foothold, something in the auto runs, we might find that lurking in the environment. Or as we start to think about Microsoft 365, it's really common, and again I see this almost daily, that attackers will have installed an inbox rule that maybe just forwards particular emails they're interested in to a slightly different location to that inbox folder, and we're going to pick that up as soon as we're integrated with the tenant. We'll see if that inbox rule was put in place, days, weeks, or months ago. And sometimes there are surprises. So absolutely, yes, during a trial, that's one of the reasons we recommend pushing out more broadly to as many kind of customer devices and M365 tenants as you feel comfortable to, just to increase the chances that we find something with that really security audit, you could call it.
Yeah, and it is like an audit. Actually, as I said, I've spoken to loads of MSPs who have been through this onboarding process. I think the big call to action here, and we'll talk about this a little bit later for MSPs watching who think that they've got their security nailed down. Have you really? And one way to put that to the litmus test is to actually do a trial of the Huntress solution and see what it comes up with. But I know I've spoken to some very, very security-focused MSPs who felt as though they've got everything in control. They've started partnering with Huntress, and it's uncovered things that they just simply weren't aware of. So, yeah, there's a big lesson there.
Absolutely, and one of the things you'll get out of the trial, or indeed just rolling this out to a customer, is the report that we generate automatically. So that's your takeaway, something that you can put in front of the customer to demonstrate the value that Huntress and the MSP in partnership are providing around uncovering either those pre-existing issues or any live incidents within the period. So if I go to the report section, this is where that multi-tenanted kind of setup comes into play, because I can change to one of my example customers, say Springfield Power. Every month there'll be a PDF generated that summarizes that month, or it can be quarterly or a custom range. But in all cases, what we're going to show, and this is where your own MSP logo can appear top right. So you're co-branding this with your colors here, with the company name there, and then it's showing during the period what's the kind of heavy lifting that Huntress has done, the topic that came up earlier on of us taking the top of the funnel events and detecting against signals that are within those events and investigating those and then reporting incidents. But for any kind of incidents that are reported, we will give a breakdown of, well, how have we detected it, and what are the details? So what kind of devices were infected, any users compromised. So that's a very useful takeaway, I would say, from what could be just a couple of weeks of running Huntress.
And just a point based on experience here as well for MSPs watching, there is a tendency, isn't there, for managed service providers to just want to take everything away from the client and just say, hey, don't worry, bro, we've got it. But these type of reports are super important to actually show the client this stuff is always happening and we're keeping you safe on an ongoing basis. So how important do you find MSPs see these reports in terms of demonstrating to their clients the ongoing value that they're delivering?
The feedback I get is it's one of our most popular features and a real selling point of Huntress, to not only have the protective service we've discussed today, but also the report that then demonstrates the value that the partner has provided to the end customer. And I think it's particularly important for a tool like Huntress, where we often break things down by the NIST cybersecurity framework, where you would have different stages of protecting yourselves, right? You identify the attack surface, then you protect it, right, with your preventative security controls. And then it comes to where Huntress fits in, which is detect and respond. That's finding the live threats and responding to those. And then the last stage would be recovery, the recover stage. Now, often if the MSP is doing a good job and the end users have their house in order in terms of, perhaps a good antivirus, good firewalls, good kind of password hygiene, well-trained users, then what you may find is there's not a lot of kind of real incidents to show in a period. So that's where this kind of reporting becomes valuable, because you can show, yes, the technology was very much turned on and working during the period. These are the signals that perhaps were picked up and investigated by the SOC, even if you didn't have the kind of alarm bell of an actual incident, which people shouldn't really be wanting to have anyway.
Yeah, and I think the worst question you can be asked as a managed service provider is, what is it we're paying you for? So if you do MSP really good, if you do cybersecurity really good, the client hardly ever knows about it. So yeah. I can't highly recommend these reports highly enough because they do demonstrate ongoing value to the client. So thank you for showing us that, Phil. Let's get into the weeds a little bit. So we talked about security for the clients, but what about security within the managed service provider business itself? So, for instance, is there granular security for features within Huntress? So can perhaps, certain engineers only have access to what they need as opposed to the whole gamut?
Yes, absolutely. So we have role-based access control for that. So firstly, we have the different levels I touched on earlier on. So we've got the top account level, and you would give the MSP team access to that typically. And then there's the organisation level, where you can, if it's appropriate, perhaps you have a bit of a co-managed setup where the business you support has an internal IT team. Those internal IT team contacts can be given access on the organisation level. So I can look at this at the account level and see, these are my account users. When I come to add an account user, I'm specifying the role. It's nicely documented on our support site what we mean by these different roles. And again, we can work through on a kind of trial basis, setting this up properly. So yeah, absolutely, you can delegate the permissions that particular users need. And that's both on the account level, that will see all customers, or indeed if I just stay on this page but I change to an example customer, this is where I can now add organization level users.
Got it. That makes absolute sense. I'm intrigued as well. You mentioned co-managed IT. We used to call it downstream IT, but where a client has perhaps got their own IT department or IT person, and you're partnering up with them as the MSP to deliver. So you can delegate certain aspects of Huntress or visibility to the client's IT person to do things there.
Yeah, you absolutely can. So that's the kind of consequences that would flow from adding them as an organization user. You're then controlling what they can see and what they can do. I mean, first of all, they're only going to be able to see any organizations that they're tied to, so don't worry, they won't see all of your other customers. But it could be helpful, in terms of perhaps minimizing the work that the MSP has to do, if it's appropriate to delegate some of the responsibilities to the end user IT team. So we want to have that option. So for example, earlier on we were looking at an incident report. So let's perhaps go back to my active instance here. Let me try and find an incident report that has a remediation plan again. So this one here does. It can either be the MSP, or it could be the end user themselves, if they're added as an organization level user with the appropriate permissions, who comes in here to review the remediation plan. In this case, we're suggesting an action of deleting an inbox rule, and the organization level user can, if it's appropriate, approve the deletion of that inbox rule. That doesn't take away the MSP's access. Obviously, the MSP admins and security engineers can do this as well, but it's an option to give this level of access to end users too.
Got it. And of course, I do a lot of video demos on this channel. We look at a lot of different software as a service platforms similar to this, but let's reiterate the human aspect here. We talked about the SOC, the Security Operations Center. So for instance, if an MSP gets an alert or something come through, they see an issue there, they're not on their own, are they? This isn't a piece of software that just brings up alerts and then it's like, over to you, Jack, you've got to deal with it. You are a cybersecurity company with absolute cybersecurity experts who help the MSP through this process.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's really in our DNA, cybersecurity, right? So please, if you need something else that's not provided within the incident report, just reach out. And we've actually made it even easier for our partners to do that. So they've had the option for a while to email incidents@huntress.io. That's a dedicated email address for querying what's in these incident reports. And there's also the normal kind of support channels here, like can be triggered by chat or via the support portal. But we've actually, for critical severity incidents, we can maybe see some examples here, right? What we've built into the portal is this request SOC support option. So it's just a button. It's a very easy way to trigger whichever you prefer. It could be a live chat, or it could be a request of a callback. Because let's say you're an MSP, maybe you've got your biggest client impacted by ransomware or some kind of breach. And Huntress has taken the extreme action, because we think it's necessary for security, to lock down that customer environment. So maybe we've isolated hosts across the network. That's a scary situation to be in. And if you're not getting all the answers, all the information you need from the incident report, and obviously it was our intention when we wrote the report to give you all the relevant information, but it's perfectly valid. You may have a question, something else that needs answering. Just request the SOC support, right, via a callback or a live chat there.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And if you're interested, as an MSP watching this, the type of people who are behind the screen working at the Huntress SOC, the Security Operations Centre, I actually did an interview, it was Tubblog 138 on my podcast, How to Become the Go-To Threat Operations Expert for MSPs, with your colleague in the UK, Dre Agger, who is just... He's just an absolute rock star in this industry. But your SOC is full of rock stars like Dre, isn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely is. So, yeah, Dre is one of our well, he's actually a manager for our SOC team, based in the UK, much like myself. And we have our SOC team based in the UK and Ireland as well, but also in different countries all over the globe. And we absolutely try to attract the best talent to our SOC, people who love and live and breathe threat hunting. And then that's what we can give them a platform to do and to learn from those superstars you mentioned, people like Dre. We're very fortunate to have other superstars, people like John Hammond, Matt Kiley. If you look up these kind of names in the security industry, that we're very proud to say they work for Huntress and contribute to our product in terms of detection engineering, in terms of the threat intelligence that we have. And we're really all about that kind of going after attackers. So there's a real kind of thrill in the chase in terms of what the SOC does. So absolutely, I'm really pleased you mentioned people like Dre that we have, because it is at the end of the day not just software, not just Huntress software, but also human beings that make this service such a powerful service.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll include in the show notes for this and, below links to all of the different interviews that I talked about and many other resources. But let's get back to the video demo. So we promised you acronyms. We're going to dive in there with some more. So we've looked at EDR, but let's look at Identity Threat Detection and Response, ITDR. So first of all, explain to me how is that different from EDR?
I guess when we started looking at EDR as part of this video demo, we thought about how you would first set it up by installing the agent software onto devices. So let's maybe take a somewhat similar approach for ITDR. So for Identity Threat Detection and Response, what we're looking at is Microsoft 365 tenants. So what you have to do as an MSP partner of ours is come to the hamburger menu, go to integrations. This is a page that we may perhaps look at later on, because there's lots of interesting integrations in here. But for now, the one you'll need to set up ITDR is this button here for Microsoft 365. It's a very quick and easy setup again, right? So you would just add a tenant in here, map it against a Huntress organization, that's a customer of yours living in the Huntress portal, sign in as a global admin purely to approve the permissions that our enterprise app needs. Then at that point we can start using the Graph API for the tenant. So there's no particular licensing requirement on the Microsoft side. For any M365 tenant, we can start pulling over the unified audit log, information we need from the tenant to run detections against it. And really what we're looking for is signs of Microsoft 365 account compromise. So can we see that there's an attacker logging into a user's account, right? That would be what we call unwanted access. We have a lot of different ways to pick that up, and we can also pick up what else might follow from an attack against Microsoft 365. So kind of telltale signs of things like business email compromise, or malicious kind of modifications to an M365 tenant. All of those sorts of things we detect for as soon as you've gone through the process of, well, let's link your Microsoft 365 tenant with the Huntress portal. That will start to populate areas of the dashboard like this ITDR area here. So I can see, look, these are my most investigated users. This is my heartbeat of M365 events that we're detecting against, and I can, do all sorts of interesting things like look at the users themselves, right, and see, well, where is this particular user logging in from? That there's obviously all sorts of rabbit holes we can go down if indeed we need to with a SOC investigation.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And we're recording this in February 2025, so if you're watching from the future, hello from the past. But one enterprise level solution that seems to be the must-have tool for 2025 for MSPs is SIEM, or Security Information and Event Management. So Phil, very first question here. How do you pronounce SIEM? I heard you call it SIEM, but I've heard other people call it SIM. So SIEM versus SIM, what exactly is it?
I hope you're not going to get me into too much trouble, Richard, but by highlighting my pronunciation, because I do call it SIEM.
I call it SIEM as well, so we're together. So if we're wrong together.
That's it. I'm happy to be wrong. I think the normal kind of way to pronounce it in Huntress probably is SIM, which sounds odd to me because I guess I kind of fly the flag for UK for Europe, and I hear SIEM a lot over here. So that's the on this big debate, I come down on the side of SIEM myself. Yeah,
and SIEM, and yeah, I think a SIM is in one of these things. You put a SIM card in there, but you use SIEM for cybersecurity. So, all joking aside, though, what is SIEM?
Yes, so it's a way for that Huntress SOC that we've been talking about quite often today to get visibility of the wider network, because we'll use a SIEM to collect logs and also detect against those logs to see if there are signs of intrusion. So I've just come to the SIEM area of the same Huntress portal we've been in for this video demo. If I come to the categories tab, this will give you an idea of the sorts of events that we can pick up using the SIEM. So starting off perhaps with Windows event logs, wherever you have installed a Huntress agent onto Windows, we can use that same Huntress agent, no additional software needed, to pull Windows event logs. We can also start to look at the wider network, which is a really key piece of the puzzle for us when it comes to doing an investigation, perhaps shedding a bit of light on root cause around how an attacker might have first got into a network. Can we see any kind of vulnerabilities that were exploited on the firewall side? Can we see any brute force attacks there? So we support a range of different firewalls, not just the ones you see on this screen that we have passes for, but we have a generic syslog capability to pull logs from all sorts of firewalls and other network devices. We can also start to pull in logs from password managers, which again could be relevant to a SOC investigation. We can look at other MSP tools you may have come across, like DNS filter. We have some generic capabilities around HTTP events, and coming very soon. And it's good that you mentioned this is February 2025, because to those in the future, we'd hope this will probably be live. This is our integration coming soon with public cloud providers like Azure, for example.
Oh, very cool. Yeah. And again, we mentioned the date on this, not to date the video. So if you're watching this in the future saying it's no longer relevant, I know that things move so quickly at Huntress. So this is a sort of a point in time, but I would encourage anybody watching this, got a broad overview. SIEM is one of the newer features. You only released that, I think it was last year, wasn't it, that it came? And prior to that, it had only really been an enterprise level solution.
That's right, and it very much fits with the ethos of Huntress as a company, as a cybersecurity vendor, in that we take tools that previously, historically, may have been only kind of available to enterprise level customers, and make those tools available to smaller, medium-sized businesses. It could be very large businesses, but we want to make sure it's available to everyone. So we want to do a couple of things with that. We firstly want it to be affordable. So even if there's not a huge security budget, we'd hope our tools are affordable. And where we're going to market via managed service providers, of course, it needs to be affordable to that managed service provider to buy the product and put their margin on top. So that's actually quite a big aspect of it. But then also there's the manageability of the solution. It's another really key reason why we are including the Huntress SOC with everything we've talked about today. So yes, the EDR, yes, the ITDR looking at Microsoft 365, but also the SIEM, where we are ingesting logs. The Huntress SOC 24/7 is looking at what comes into the SIEM. So again, that's very manageable then for the MSP, for the end user business, because they don't have to have a large 24/7 staffed SOC team themselves or internal security team to be able to get the most out of this product, right? Because it's one thing having an alert from some sort of security software you've purchased, but it's another thing entirely sifting through those alerts and saying, well, this is an actual threat. This is something you have to address. Here's how to address it. That's a completely different situation to just deploying a load of security tools.
Yeah, and we've talked about the benefits of the Huntress SOC, the benefits of this human being backed approach to cybersecurity. But of course, that works two ways. So anyone watching this will know that even with the best technology in the world, Phil, the weakest link in any cybersecurity approach with your clients is the human beings on your client side. So Huntress made an acquisition a while back now to address that. So tell us a little bit more about the security awareness training, or the SAT.
Yeah, absolutely. So the acquisition was at least a couple of years ago now of a company called Curricula. I think Huntress was actually using Curricula as a customer of theirs and liked the product so much that we decided to buy the company and then really make sure that tool, the security awareness training, was MSP friendly again. So let's make sure that MSPs can use this with their customers. So this SAT dashboard will link to the mycurricula.com portal, where it's the same sort of philosophy, right? So under accounts, our partners, the MSPs, can create separate accounts for their customers, and then they can provide training via the library on demand, or they can actually these days just sign up for what we call managed learning, or indeed managed phishing. So we have our library of training episodes. So this is short video-based content, but also we have our library of phishing scenarios. So there's lots of ways that you can simulate a phishing email, see if anybody's going to fall for it, and then we can actually in that moment deliver some very timely training to them around what they did wrong. We call that phishing defense coaching. So there's lots of ways to train users. But again, thinking about, yes, Huntress bought Curricula, and since then we have been making sure that Curricula technology is accessible to MSPs. So we had a lot of feedback that, yes, the content's good, the phishing scenarios are good, but it was a lot of work to actually create the assignments that would push that out perhaps on a monthly basis to enrolled learners. So that's the whole reason we came up with, if I go to perhaps assignments, you can see there's this reference to what we call a learning plan, and you can just turn on managed learning, Huntress managed learning, for your customer accounts. And that means that the Huntress team will actually, on the first business day of each month, they will push out the training episode on behalf of the MSP. So there's nothing further for the MSP to do for that drip feed of very relevant, up-to-date content to get in front of the end user, and then it's just automatic that we will report on have they completed it, what was the scores as they've gone through answering the questions that were part of the episodes, and very much the same philosophy when it comes to phishing. So just turn on managed phishing if you want the Huntress team to again push out phishing simulations over a course of a month to all of your enrolled learners. So we've tried to make it as simple as possible for MSPs to provide this learning content.
Yeah, and I think it's great. And again, I would reiterate for the audience watching here today, one of the fundamental tenets of managed services is about lowering your cost of support to increase your profits. And one of the best ways that you can do that is to educate your clients, educate the end users into not doing things that you then have to mop up. I don't know if you agree with this, Phil, but I think managed security awareness training is another brilliant way of demonstrating ongoing value to clients, to make the clients realize, hey, this is not just a partner who fixes things when things go wrong. They're trying to prevent things from going wrong.
Absolutely, and we would challenge our partners to really think about how this tool, this security awareness training, can be used to provide more and more value to the customers. Right. So if I look at the library here, we have episodes around things that are not just kind of traditional security, like the adversary in the middle would be, yes, that's a security topic that we see coming up a lot. That's a very prevalent attack that we can train people on. But also we have things around, Gen AI and things like AI hallucinations. That's very much the world we are rapidly moving into. So our partners can train their end user businesses on that as well. And there's compliance topics, of course, around things like GDPR. Or there's even the potential to create custom trainings. So we've had some partners do some cool things around, and this is an example in my demo environment, using your new VoIP phones, or it could just be, here's a general introduction to a new client of, this is us as an MSP, here's how to contact us, here's policies, or a link to our website, and it's a custom training episode that is pushed out from this Huntress SAT portal as well.
Yeah, and again, I would say for any MSP watching this, there are quite a lot of cybersecurity awareness training platforms on the market at the moment. Take a look at this one because Huntress does this really, really well. Definitely worth a look. I'm going to rewind a little bit. I want to pick up on something you mentioned earlier, and that is about the fact that most MSPs already have established technology. They have this stack of tech that they use. So let's talk about integrations. Let's rewind a little bit. You sort of glimpsed at this earlier on. What integrations does Huntress offer with other MSP tools that are out there?
So there are quite a few integrations, and I think we looked at it somewhat when we were going through the options to install the Huntress agent. But also on an ongoing basis, let's say you've installed, it's very useful to be able to integrate with the ticketing system that you use as an MSP. So I'm sure many people watching will see familiar names on the screen here. So we can integrate with ConnectWise Manage, Autotask, Halo PSA. There's a whole range of PSA ticketing systems we can integrate with. And once you set up that integration, what will happen is whenever there's a Huntress incident, I think we've looked at maybe a couple of examples today, that incident report will, yes, live in the Huntress portal, but it will also create a ticket with the same information within your PSA. So if you, as your service desk, your support desk, you're living from your PSA, which is very often the case, then you can see the relevant security instance there as Huntress uncovers things. So it's just more convenient and a bit of a time saving there. So that's one of our integrations. There's also a whole topic around integrating with Microsoft. I think that there's a lot of Microsoft out there that's sold and supported by MSPs. So we've talked about integrating with Microsoft 365, but if there's Defender in an environment, so Windows Defender, or indeed you're seeing here Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, we can integrate with that as well. So that is only going to give the Huntress SOC more visibility of an environment, allow us to detect threats and respond in all the ways we've talked about today.
And I'm just going to pick up on something there. So there's going to be some MSPs watching or some IT solution providers watching. Don't use any of those products there. Perhaps don't use a PSA product. They use just like a ticketing system, help desk or whatever. That's where the email integration comes in, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's one of the things we can perhaps work through on a trial. But absolutely, yes, it's very common for the email integration we have, and this is just simply where you would specify which email address or email addresses should receive instant reports and escalations, right? You might be able to plug in an email address there that can then generate a ticket on your side. We often see that with solutions that maybe aren't in this list, so things like Jira, you name it, that there's a whole range of ticketing systems that will likely be able to receive that incoming email and create a ticket off of the back of it. And then the other thing I would mention is one of the popular ways for us to get in contact with partners around critical severity incidents specifically is under settings. And this is where we looked at managed response earlier on, but now I'm going to go to email and notifications. Here our partners can add a mobile phone number that will receive either a text or a robocall or indeed both of those, as I say, specifically for critical severity incidents that you probably want to know about as soon as possible.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. What type of MSPs are using Huntress at the moment? And what I mean by that is it only for big MSPs, or are you finding that there's some one-person bands using this? Because I'm speaking again from experience here. When I ran my MSP business, one of the best things I ever did was buddy up with other technology companies to lighten the load on me, to free up my time, to implement and PSA tools, to do better marketing, to go to more sales meetings, that type of thing. So is there a typical type of MSP that you find you're working with at the moment?
So I would say it's all shapes and sizes of MSPs. From your very small MSPs, so maybe it's an individual or just a couple of people who are just starting out. We're very happy to work with those MSPs, right the way through to much larger MSPs that would manage tens of thousands of endpoints, and maybe even themselves for the larger MSPs would actually have a 24/7 SOC themselves, which Huntress can still sit alongside. So we have lots of interesting conversations with all different types of MSPs and that have different service offerings. It's one of the things that makes the job I do interesting, is getting into that conversation around, okay, some of the stuff we've covered today, this is Huntress technology, but how can that kind of intersect with what you do as an MSP to provide the ultimate offering to the customer? What do we need to explore as part of that? But absolutely all sizes of MSPs, and I think our licensing model reflects that as well. So we're not putting these barriers up to maybe the smaller MSPs getting started with Huntress in terms of, there needs to be a massive commitment for multiple years. There's none of that. It's just a 1-year contract. That's the only length of contract we do. And okay. It's for the licensing, the commitment that makes sense for the partner.
And how does the billing to MSPs for the product work? Is there a product that's licensed per endpoint, per user? What does it look like?
So it's licensed per endpoint for, I guess, the first product we spoke about today, which is the Huntress endpoint detection and response. It's licensed per user, per billable license from Microsoft. That's really what we align to for ITDR, and we're looking at M365 users there. So I guess to perhaps give an example of this, let's just in my demo environment, I'm going to view all identities, and all identities is 17. But I'll filter that down to billable, and it's actually 17 billable identities in this case. But we often see in partner environments that there might be things like shared mailboxes that don't have a billable license from Microsoft, and therefore Huntress is not going to bill you for them either, because we're really trying to bill you for the human-controlled entities for M365. And then I guess just to be comprehensive here, for SIEM, we're really looking at the number of data sources that you have turned on, and you're in complete control of that. So the number of hosts sending us Windows event logs, the number of network devices sending us syslog, each one of those would count as a data source, and then that would be your licensing. It actually creates a bit of a data pool for you as well. So per data source, you have 10 gig of storage that can be ingested to the Huntress SIEM per month. And that's created an overall pool for you as an MSP to tap into. And for security awareness training, it's licensed per learner.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. And you talked about some of the other benefits of being a Huntress partner. So we talked about all the different licensable products that you've got there. We talked about the platform. Let's talk about some of the other benefits there. So you've mentioned a couple of them. Can you talk in more depth about what it means to become a Huntress partner, how much it costs to become a Huntress partner, and some of the benefits you get?
So it doesn't cost anything to use Huntress technology internally. if you are an MSP, right? So we have this program for MSPs, which we call the Neighborhood Watch program.
Brilliant program, by the way. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's one of the things we are perhaps quite famous for in the market. We're very proud of it ourselves, because when I think we started the conversation perhaps today thinking about, well, how does Huntress try to give back to the MSP community that we serve? And this is one of the really tangible ways we can do that, because if we're not securing the MSP themselves, then how can we effectively secure their customers? Because if an MSP gets breached, and let's say an attacker takes over some of their machines and can access their RMM tool, that's really, really bad news for the end customers themselves. It's bad news for the MSP. So we just drew this line in the sand and said that, well, let's provide those internal licenses for the MSP for free. And there's not even a requirement for you to resell Huntress to take advantage of those Neighborhood Watch licenses. So we feel very strongly about that particular program. And then there's a lot else that we do to kind of educate the wider community. We try to give back to the InfoSec community. So we have our Tradecraft Tuesday, for example, which is really good in the weeds content. So a lot deeper tech than we've gone through today. If you're interested in, what are attackers doing in an environment and how do we catch that, then we go very deep on that in our Tradecraft Tuesday sessions. And that's available to everyone. You don't even need to be a Huntress partner to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and again, for the benefit of listeners, viewers, we'll include links in the show notes to all of the resources that we talked about here, including the Neighborhood Watch, and including Tradecraft Tuesday, including all the interviews we talked about. So many different resources. We'll include them there. I guess as we come to the end of our time here, big question, and I think we know the answer to this: is there a free trial of this available for MSPs?
Yes, there absolutely is. We would encourage that. So we don't put limitations against the trial either. So if you really want to put us through our paces, right, run that security audit across multiple customers of yours, we would absolutely be all for that. That will increase your familiarity with the Huntress platform, put you in a really good position for deciding, do you want to move forward for particular customers or all customers with the Huntress service. So yeah, there absolutely is a free trial across all 4 products. So you would just very quickly fill in a form to spin up your own portal. So this demo is going to be replaced by ABCIT, for example, .huntress.io, and then you can kick off trials for any of our 4 products, right? So as a trial manager for that, and you would just kick off your own trials, and we're on hand to support through the trial. We're not going to be breathing down your neck, looking over your shoulder at everything you're doing. But if you want to have like a check-in call, review the findings that come from the trial, those reports and the incident reports in the portal, then we're on hand to do that.
No worries. Very cool indeed. And of course, you and I are based in the UK, a couple of Brits talking about this technology, but Huntress is a global company. So talk us through, if you're an MSP in Australia, if you're an MSP in North America, and an MSP in South Africa, is this platform solution still available?
Absolutely, it is, yeah. So I'm part of the EMEA team, we call it. So whilst I work very often with UK and Irish partners, we also have partners all over Europe. We have a few in the Middle East and Africa as well. So the technology really is the same in all jurisdictions, I would say, and we have the staff in different regions on hand in your time zone to support you. So obviously, if you're in Europe, you'll probably be talking to myself or one of my colleagues on the sales engineering side, but we have account managers, sales engineers, and indeed the SOC analysts based in Australia, based in the US and Canada. So plenty of ways to talk to Huntress, I would say.
Yeah, and super important, I would say, having seen behind the scenes at the Huntress SOC a little bit, that you are not working staff to the bone. You are not getting SOC engineers who are absolutely exhausted because they pulled an all-nighter. You have got a global team that sort of follows the sun, and people are fresh, working decent hours, and able to deal with the problems that are coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. That's only going to increase the quality of the output. It's not easy to do a SOC investigation and threat hunting, so we want our SOC analysts to be working in their kind of normal daylight hours. I actually used to work as part of a 24/7 NOC team quite a few years ago, and I was drinking cans of Red Bull, I was drinking black coffee, and it was a challenge. It wasn't necessarily always my best work that I was physically able to produce at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning. So, yeah, absolutely. It's quite important to us that we have that follow the sun approach of staffing the SOC on a 24/7 basis.
And I noticed you managed to get a final acronym in there just under the wire, just before we finished. NOC, Network Operations Center. So I like that. So if you're playing buzzword bingo with us, you've now hopefully ticked everything off there.
I'd hope so.
This has been fantastic anyway, Phil. I really appreciate it. This has been one of the most requested video demos that we've had. So I hope that we've covered a lot. There's so much more that we could cover. So let us know in the comments if you've got any follow-up questions. But I guess anybody wanting to continue the conversation either with you directly, Phil, or to take a closer look at Huntress, how can they find you online?
So by all means visit the Huntress website, huntress.com. From there you'll be able to spin up your trial. You'll be able to perhaps access our Neighborhood Watch program if that's something that you're interested in. If you'd like to start a conversation with myself directly, you can reach out on LinkedIn. As I mentioned, we've got staff all over the world. We also get out to see partners. We go to where the MSPs are, so you'll likely see us. There's Right of Boom happening at the moment in Las Vegas. There's the tech tribes all over the world, I believe. We go to some of those. And also we have our own roadshows. So we have our Huntress roadshows. So there's quite a few happening in the UK and wider Europe. There are some in North America, there are some in Australia. So you may have an opportunity to kind of meet with Huntress in person, and we can do some really cool things around going through some of the attacker tradecraft on stage and in our presentations.
Yeah, and if you've been intrigued watching this as an MSP but wondering what an MSP using the Huntress platform in real life looks like, I did an interview recently with Chris Pottrell, our friend Chris Pottrell at Nebula IT, UK-based MSP in Tubtalk 174, so you can get insights from one of the UK's most innovative MSPs there. And I appreciate we have mentioned a ton of resources here, as we always do. So what we've done, we've put together a landing page at Tubblog, the hub for MSPs. So go to tub.co/Huntress, and we've included all of the resources and a whole lot more besides. But Phil, this has been absolutely brilliant. Is there anything we haven't covered today?
I think there's always a danger I could probably talk for hours on Huntress technology. So no, I think hopefully this has been a good introduction to the different products we offer. And please, if you want to continue the conversation, just reach out. We're always happy to talk to MSPs. We're always happy to talk about security in general, by the way. So any kind of security questions you have, it's not all about Huntress, the security challenges, right? So we'll happily be a part of those conversations too.
Awesome. Phil, this has been brilliant. Thanks for your time today.
No problem. Thank you, Richard. Cheers.